Hello! We have yet another Ask Me Anything this time. Scott is not here. It's not with us. He gets something he needed to do. So this week and the next week, no Scott. Today only me. Next week, I think we might have a guest. Anyways, you know the drill. There is no script. I did not prepare anything in advance. It's all about you asking questions and me and a guest, when we have a guest, answering those questions if you know the answer. So start typing. There we go. Pop, pop, pop. Go with it. Now let's go with the first one from Phoebe, probably. Do you have any thoughts on an upcoming Argo CD source hydrator? Oh, I have so many thoughts. Let me start first with thoughts that are... No, let me explain what I think that the goal of that sub-project is. I haven't used it yet. I just went through the documentation. So the idea is to, when you instruct Argo CD to, let's say, synchronize into the cluster your Helm chart or customize or something else, instead of doing that straight away, it would actually convert templates, let's say, whichever format you're using, into raw YAML files and push them to Git, and then it would synchronize from those files, right? And the advantage of that is that in that case, we have the desired state defined in declarative format, right? Now, this might sound confusing because some people might think, hey, Helm is declarative. It's not. It's not declarative at all, or at least not completely. Customize is not declarative either, right? Declarative means that you have clearly declared what you want. With Helm, it's not declarative simply because you have loops, you have conditionals, you have variable substitution, and so on and so forth, right? That does not mean that it's bad, just not declarative. So the idea is to have clearly defined, okay, this is what I want, right? And that's pure YAML. And that being said, still not entering into the Argo CD source hydrator, that's something that I've been doing for a very long time now, right? And I kind of feel that we all got it wrong, kind of that we want to define something in declarative format, and I don't believe that that's very useful. I've been declaring what I want in KCL, for example. That's my favorite, but the same thing would be like Helm customers or anything we want, because it's easier for me to express things in a more expressive language. But I want the outcome of that to be declarative, right? So I've been executing KCL run to generate from my KCL templates, let's say, pure YAML, pushing it to Git. If I would be using while now, I would be executing Helm template. You get the definition of what you want, push it to Git, and I'll let Argo CD do the trick, right? Essentially, even Helm itself, when we execute like Helm install, it's not that Helm chart is applied to the Kubernetes cluster. No, Helm install behind the scenes is executing something similar to Helm template and generating YAML and then applying that YAML to the cluster, right? We are just, with the approach I'm talking about, we are actually making that intermediary step visible instead of keep being hidden. Now, Argo CD source hydrator, to my understanding, again, I haven't used it, I just went through the docs, it's very, very new, would actually do that process for us. So instead of you executing Helm template and then git add, git commit, git push, and push it to Git, Argo CD would do that for us, right? We set up secret with the permissions to write stuff to Git repo, and whenever there is a change to our Helm chart or customize, instead of applying it, actually instead of internally doing Helm template process and applying it, it would repeat that process Helm template, but push it to Git so that we know what we're going to get, and then apply to the cluster, right? So I'm not 100% sure yet whether we need Argo CD to do that. But as a general gist that we should be doing that, we should be actually generating declarative YAML, JSON, whatever you're using, storing that in Git and let Argo CD or Flux synchronize it. I'm fully in favor. I'm not sure whether that answers your question, Phoebe. Let me know if it doesn't, and I'll try to elaborate more. Now we have a bunch of, actually, very quick, just kind of to pay the expenses. We have a sponsor in this show. We had it in previous one, but I forgot about it, and they have never mentioned it. But oh no! Stop, Victor. There we go. Remove the message. Yeah. So Codefresh is sponsoring this stream, and it's cool that I just talked about Argo CD because what they're giving you is training course, ways to learn everything there is to learn about Argo CD specifically, GitOps in general. If you do choose to use it, and I invite you to do so, just write Victor over there as the code and you get 50% off. Codefresh, thank you for sponsoring this stream. And now let's go back to the questions. That's it, right? So what else do we have? We have a bunch of questions from Miroslav. He was really put a lot of effort here. Asked by my colleagues to help with infrastructure and CI. They're using bare metal servers with Proxmox as the hypervisor. Various websites and databases will be deployed there. Cool. So far, no question, right? And then following questions. Let's go to the first one. I'm planning to deploy a Kubernetes cluster using Rancher. Cool. Not my choice, but cool. Have you had any experience with it? With Rancher, I had a lot of experience, but a long time ago. I haven't been using it for a while. So I don't know where it is right now. Now, back in the day, and here is the question also, integration of Rancher with Cluster API. Again, I don't know where it is today, but back when I was using it last time, I did not really like the way how it integrated, let's say, with Cluster API, because it back in the day, not sure now, it didn't use really Cluster API, but the fork of Cluster API, and that was kind of silly because I could, just as I'm not 100% convinced that Red Hat, for example, should be a fork of Kubernetes instead of just distribution of Kubernetes. So I'm not sure where Rancher is with that today. I didn't like what they were doing with Cluster API in the past, but I'm really thrilled. I love Cluster API in general, right? So if the question is, should you use Cluster API with or without Rancher to manage your stuff, especially with Proxmox, the answer is huge yes. So do it, right? Independently of me not knowing how it integrates these days with Rancher. And then more. Do you have any thoughts or opinions on this approach? In the new cluster, I need a simple CI service, no GitHub Actions, Azure DevOps, and so on and so forth. That's unfortunate. I love GitHub Actions. I think it's there, it's easy, but I understand that not everybody can use it. And here comes the complicated part, right? I'm considering Jenkins X. It looks quite interesting right now. Could you recommend it or something else that's quick and easy to deploy and work in such an environment? I'm also not following Jenkins X anymore, but I will say that I was very, very involved with Jenkins X in certain ways, almost from the very beginning, right? And I think that Jenkins X was a great idea. I think that it had a great start, and I think that it ended miserably, in a bad sense, right? The project was essentially abandoned by every single maintainer of the project, right? So all the people, as far as I know, and I haven't checked the comments lately, all the people that were involved with Jenkins X left that project, right? And that's a bad sign. Now, I don't know whether somebody picked it up now or whether it's still dead in the water. I'm not following that, but I would be very suspicious that Jenkins X will get back on track, right? So, without checking the latest and greatest of Jenkins X, I would say don't, right? If all maintainers abandon a project, there's something wrong with it. Think of it that way. And then, is Jenkins the ultimate choice? That's a hard one for me to answer because I was involved with Jenkins as well. Everybody knows Jenkins, right? Everybody uses Jenkins. It is proven to work on scale somehow, probably. So from the experience perspective, it's good because you know it probably, right? Now, if you're starting from scratch and you want to self-manage a solution, meaning that GitHub Actions and similar stuff is not an option, I would probably go with Tekton today, right? Especially you already said actually that you are doing things with Kubernetes, so Kubernetes would be a natural place to run, among other things, your workflows. Tekton is still maintained. It is one of the 2 common solutions for self-managed workflows in Kubernetes. The other one being Argo workflows. I have slight preference for Tekton, but the other one would be okay as well. So I would probably look at Tekton, unless you're already very familiar with Jenkins and say, hey, I want to use something that I'm already familiar with, then yeah, go for it, right? And that's I think that I answered all your questions, Miroslav. I'm not sure if I did. If I missed because you wrote many, let me know. Okay, now, Minasi, I haven't read those questions in advance, so I don't know what's coming, right? Sending notifications as a result of app cluster change, new image, new sync with Argo CD, Flux, secret update, any recommendation? I don't know of a good solution, to be honest, and I would love to have a good solution, and I don't know of any. The one that I use the most is Argo Events, right? And that can kind of do that, but it's also a project that does not receive much love. And I had a lot of issues with it throughout the time I used it heavily. But it is the best I know, right? Or maybe the only one, right? The second one would be maybe you could kind of use and modify Knative eventing. I'm not sure, but yeah, Argo events. That would be the thing that you should probably use, no matter what my opinion is about it. Right? It's probably one of the few, or if not the only solution for something like that. And I'm assuming that when you say notifications, you don't mean only notifications to Slack. Actually, let me change my answer. If by notification you mean notification to Slack, things like that, then I would probably check out Robusta. That would give you that. My previous answer was more talking about notifications that could be also to machines. So this happened, I want to send a webhook to somewhere else that would do something else, right? To kind of chain the events. If notifications is to Slack or something similar, then Robusta should probably do for you. I'm not sure whether they track new images and new sync, so I might be wrong. If they don't, then Argo events for sure. If it's notifications to Slack or something similar. Okay, more from Guy Balmas. Many consider GitOps paradigm to be solely reconciliation of desired state in Git to the current state in cluster. And then there is more. No, that's a different one. Here's more. But GitOps consists of much more like PR reviews, branching strategies, and much more. What are your takes on those Git operations to be declarative or even infrastructure as code? Now, GitOps is defined, right? We know exactly what GitOps is. And let me just Google it quickly so that I don't... where is it? Oh, I cannot find it now. Anyway, GitOps has 4 rules that must be implemented. One is to be declarative, what you're defining, which nobody follows because like Helm is not declarative. Pull-based mechanism, continuous reconciliation, and I forgot what the last one is, right? There is nothing in in GitOps description, official. I think it's actually Open GitOps. Let me see whether that's the one. Open GitOps, right? Yes, that's the one, right? So the 4 principles: declarative, versioned and immutable, pulled automatically, and continuously reconciled, right? So if a tool implements those 4, that's a GitOps tool, right? There is nothing about PR reviews, branching strategies, and much more, right? So now that does not mean that you shouldn't be doing PR reviews, that you shouldn't have some branching strategy and what's or not. You should, but they are not strictly tied to GitOps, right? GitOps are those 4 principles that I mentioned before. That's it. That's all there is to it. And of course, we have tools that implement those 4. So not directly related, but yeah, do PR reviews, right? Of course you should do it. Okay. What is your opinion about Kubestronaut? I don't know what it is. I honestly don't know what it is. Nikos, sorry for that. I need to Google it just to see. Maybe sometimes I know what something is, but forgot the name. Okay, so it's some kind of training. I haven't done trainings in a long while, right? Training, certifications, none of those things. Not because I don't think that you should not be doing those, but simply because I've been doing that a few decades ago, and now I'm in a different area of life, right? I'm more interested in things, very new things, edge things. I don't mean edge computing, but new, cutting edge type of stuff that if I wait for certification for the things I'm interested in, I would die or retire. So I'm not following those things, so I have no opinion. Sorry for that. More from Romans. How do you reference and validate shared schemas definitions in an app repo when they're defined in a separate repo for an IDP with composite resources? Oh, wait, I'm not sure I understand the question. How do you reference and validate shared schemas definitions in an app repo when they're defined? I'm not sure I get the question. Romans, can you kind of clarify? Oh, there's more. I get the idea in principle, which is why I keep asking for vertical slice examples, especially with config languages like KCL and Q. Again, I'm not 100% sure that I got it, Roman. I'm terribly sorry. I'm going to read it one more time just in case. I'm not sure I understand. I'm assuming that you're talking about Kubernetes schemas, CRD schemas, or baked-in schemas. But I'm not sure which type of validations you mean, right? To begin with, if you try to apply something to Kubernetes that does not meet the schema of the resource, it's going to automatically say no. So you can just do dry run even. If you're talking about some kind of policy validations like Kyverno, for example, or Kubernetes admission validation policies, or whatever is the name, the one that is baked now in, it will also validate it. But then we're talking about policies that you create, not necessarily validating the schema itself, but validating it in a specific context. I'm not sure whether that's what you refer. Please let me know in the comment, and I'll probably get it the second time. Okay, Konstantin. What are a couple or 3 most important trending tools in Kubernetes Ocean now? Oh, first of all, my first answer is going to reflect how biased I am. I would definitely put Crossplane there. Now, I'm biased because I work in Crossplane project, right? Now you can say that I work there because I believe it's one of the most significant projects, or you can say that I believe because I work there. It's up to you to choose which interpretation you want. But I definitely think that Crossplane would be one of the 3. And I will put it in terms of categories, right? There are some important categories that that we should somehow apply. So I will pick networking as a second one, and that's where Cilium shines probably. So put Cilium as the second. I think that we all need some policies, and that's either the one baked into Kubernetes validation admission policies, or whatever the name is. Validating admission policies, I think, or Kyverno. That would be 3. And definitely GitOps, that would be 4. And definitely OpenTelemetry and Prometheus. I'm going to put them together. because I have a strange relation with OpenTelemetry. I think it's great for traces, but I still use Prometheus for metrics, right? Which is not necessarily OpenTelemetry. So you got 5 or 6. I delivered more than expected. Okay, from Count Brapkula. Is issuing XR API through a claim directly to Crossplane to provision infra without going through Git Argo CD bad practice? Whew. So I really, over time, what I really care about is that there is an API between a service consumer and service provider, right? And between those two, there is an API. That you can say that for AWS, right? How do you create EC2 instance? And don't say Terraform, right? Because Terraform is going to that API and CloudFormation and so on and so forth. Directly or through some other tools, you're going through API, right? So from that perspective, I put higher value on APIs than GitOps, right? Because without an API, there is no GitOps. So yeah, going directly to the API is not necessarily horrible thing. Now, if you would go through Git, that would be even better, right? So it's not a bad practice. I would just say that without Argo CD, I would just say that it's a better practice with or Flux. Okay, what else? VS Rock 3, love from India. Oh, I hope I'll be coming from KubeCon India. I hope. I haven't received news yet whether I will or no, but I hope that I will see you folks over there. What do you think from Steven? Steven, yeah. What do you think about Langflow on Kubernetes cluster, maybe EKS? I haven't used Langflow. I don't have a special opinion. Sorry for that. There are things I haven't used yet, or things that I used, but not enough to give any opinion. So this is one of those. Sorry for that. Okay, from Zeralis, or Zerals, something like that. What would you recommend to develop for Kubernetes in 2025 with a short dev loop? Tilt, dev space, scaffold, telepresence. Oh, amazing question. And the reason why I like this question is that right now, today is, and yesterday as well, for the last 2 weeks, I've been working on a group of videos that will go through different solutions, right? With different pros and cons of all of those, right? So stay tuned for that. It's coming. The first one will be released in a couple of weeks, and then a couple of them will be following. And I will end that whole series in a complete solution that contains everything I believe we should have for development environments. So think of it like developer platform, but the part focused on development environments, right? Until then, I will give you a short answer. Actually, I will give you 2 answers, 2 of my favorites. That would be Octeto, if you want fully remote development environments. And another one would be MirrorD, which allows you to work completely locally, but connect things from the remote cluster. That would be, think of MirrorD as telepresence, but good. That would be more or less the description. Like, imagine telepresence, but the one you like, not telepresence. I'm not very fond of telepresence, as you can guess, right? So MirrorD as telepresence something, and you probably don't need anything else. Now, if you don't want to run it locally and connect it with everything else in a cluster, inbound, outbound, like what telepresence does partly, then Octeto would be my second favorite. They're very different though. So MirrorD, Octeto, those 2. Now, what else? Okay, self-hosted monitoring, Alloy, autocorrector, or something else. Also for application metrics, Prometheus operating CRDs or OTIL. So for traces, whatever you want as long as it's OTIL, right? or OpenTelemetry, I think that when it comes to traces, OpenTelemetry rules, and somebody would have a very hard time convincing me not to use it. For metrics, I'm not convinced yet, right? Because the reason why I like OpenTelemetry is because it is a standard, right? But guess what? In Kubernetes, actually, Prometheus format, when we're talking about metrics, not traces now, Prometheus is the standard, not really OpenTelemetry. And you can see that through other tools, right? If there are many tools that one way or another need metrics, and the first implementation is always Prometheus, right? So metrics, Prometheus, and when I say Prometheus, I don't necessarily mean Prometheus, like a tool, but Prometheus format for metrics. And then you can do it with Prometheus, you can do it with Victoria Metrics, you can do it with many other tools that all understand that format, right? And the reason for that, I repeat, mainly because it is the most widely supported through other tools that you will be using. Like, let's say, if you want some kind of progressive delivery, right? That tool, whichever you choose for progressive delivery, is either going to support only one format, and then it's going to be Prometheus, or multiple formats, but it's always one of them is always Prometheus, right? Traces use Hotel, and for logs, I couldn't care less, to be honest. I mean, I care about logs, but not necessarily whether they're in a specific format. Okay. From Adderley Flores, how do you control changes in SDLC? By pushing every single change to Git. It's as easy as that, right? If you want to change the release, if you want to change the code, what do? You push it to Git. If you have new tests, what do? Push it to Git. If you have a new release, what do? You modify the manifest, modify the tag of the manifest, or whatever is however you're describing that release, and push it to Git, right? So you control it by pushing it to Git. Now, if the question is control it from the human perspective, like who can do what? That's Git permissions, right? Because if you use GitOps, the only way you can apply something to a cluster, unless you have super duper permissions in break glass scenario, is to push it to Git. So if the Git is the only way how something can get into the cluster, then Git is where you control it from the permissions perspective. If that's your question, right? Again, I often do not understand the whole context of the question. So if I don't answer it, well, just shoot me another email. Not email, write another comment, and I'll do better, right? Let's do one more before a quick break, and then everything else. Thoughts on Grafana putting Promptail and now on call to maintenance mode in favor of their cloud offering. I haven't seen those news, so no opinion yet, right? So I don't know exactly what I haven't been following, so I do not know what that really means, right? What I do know is that projects every successful project needs dedicated maintenance, dedicated maintainers needs to be paid somehow. So I do believe that companies like Grafana deserve to earn money to be able to keep the projects going. Whether they're earning more than they should or less, that I cannot answer. And I haven't seen the news yet, so I don't know exactly what changes they made right now, so I cannot say much more. What else? Okay, let's do a quick one, another one for, no, where is it? Oh, let's remove this comment. Let's do another quick one for the sponsors. Thank you, Codefresh, for sponsoring, and you, all of you watching, please, please, please go there. Use my code if you need certification, to training, whatever you need for GitOps. Go there, do it. It's cool. I know people who did it, so they're really good at it. So please do it, and then Codefresh you will be happy if we're getting a good learning experience, and they will be happy for coming from here, and they will continue sponsoring and all the jazz, right? There we go. That's all I'm going to say. Let's go back to the questions. You see, I'm not good at selling anything. Um, okay, so what next one? What do you think about security for Gen AI on Kubernetes infra? That's still unresolved. No, security for Gen AI on Kubernetes infra. I'm not sure what you mean by that question, actually, now when I read it second time. If you said security for Gen AI, like using Gen AI, Copilot or something like that, then I think that that's still unsolved problem. There are a couple of projects that are in a very early stage, so I don't want to talk about them yet because I think that they're too green to be used right now. But there are a few projects that are coming along and going to help a lot. And in this context, what I mean by help, and again, I'm not sure that I understand the context of your question, so I might be wrong, right? But hey, how can we ensure that the inputs that we are giving to Gen AI running somewhere are not leaking anything sensitive, right? So if I use Copilot, how do I ensure that it will not end up passing my password, for example, or authentication to something, or confidential code anywhere where it shouldn't? How to ensure that that never leaves my laptop? And very early stages. Right now, you need to trust Microsoft or whomever you're using. But soon we will have, and I expect a couple of months from now that I will be talking much more about it. I just need the projects I'm having my eye on to mature a bit more. Now, my question is probably not hitting my answer is not hitting your question, because then you added on Kubernetes infra, so I'm not sure what you meant, Stephen. Probably something other than what I described. Let me know in the comments. Okay, from Brian. Do you use schemas in KCL Crossplane compositions? Or do you have any tips for developing KCL and keeping the composition up to date? Oh yeah, I'm using schemas. I'm definitely using schemas, at least for most of my KCL, more of my Crossplane compositions written in KCL. And if you go to Upbound, I think it's called Upbound DevOps, you will get schemas as well. And I'm not selling you anything, it's free. Yeah, Upbound provides, among other things, there's a whole package of development experience or developer experience for Crossplane with a bunch of goodies, and one of those is schemas. So yeah, check it out. And again, it's free. Why not? And by the way, once you get schemas, things change drastically, right? Because in the past, I was going to the marketplace to check the documentation and then every field and copy it and paste it unless I memorized it, because I did it many times already. With schemas, things are so much easier. So DevX, Upbound DevX, just Google that one and you'll find it. From Dennis, hello. Could you please give some insight on how Crossplane resources can source existing Kubernetes secrets in certain fields? Is there an option? Sorry, I'm definitely a bad docs reader. Yes, there is an option. When you create, actually there are quite a few options. One that I use very often, and let me know whether that's your use case. If not, let me know what your use case is. But I would create a Kubernetes object, right, that needs some information. And that information is either from other resources in composition, which is easy, or from other resources in that cluster that have nothing to do with Crossplane. And then you can just specify Kubernetes object, you can specify from where to get it. I think it's source. Or source from, or something like that, is a field where you can specify kind, name, API, and which field to fetch, and then put it somewhere else. Now, if you don't want that to fetch that information for a reason to put it in a Kubernetes, some other Kubernetes resource, but use it elsewhere, you can add that resource that you want to observe as part of the composition, but in observe-only mode, right? So let's say that you have a secret called X, right? And you just want to fetch data. you can add that to a composition, but instruct Crossplane just to observe it, not to manage it, not to do anything with it, just to read stuff. So observe only mode. And then once it's part of the composition, you can read it just as you would read from any other resource in that composition. If that was too confusing, you can ping me and I can walk you through some examples. Okay, Ryan, not a question, but looking forward to Crossplane 2.0. Looks like some good things in the proposal. Namespace MRs, reduced need for provider Kubernetes, etc. Yes. There are a few things coming in Crossplane 2.0. And as you mentioned, there are two that I'm most excited about. First, that not only MRs, but everything will be namespaced. You will still be able to use version 2.0 with cluster scoped resources, but with a few special exceptions, now everything can be namespaced. And that's amazing, right? So CRD, obviously, there will be cluster scope simply because they have to. There is no option in Kubernetes not to have it, but almost everything else, if not everything else, will be namespace scoped. That's going to be awesome. And another great addition, which you mentioned, is reduced need for provider Kubernetes. Yes. Now, right now in version 1, if you want your Crossplane compositions to manage some Kubernetes resources, you would use Kubernetes provider and specifically object resource. And now you will be able to do it without. Just directly go for whatever you want to manage. Now, object is still very, very useful, just to be clear, because if you can skip it completely if you want to manage some resources in the same cluster, right? And then you don't need a wrapper of the object. But for example, if you would like that something to be done on a different cluster, then you will still need object, because object has a mechanism to actually point you to a different cluster and a few other features. So object has features that you might need, but if you don't need them, then yeah, you can go directly without Kubernetes provider, which is going to be awesome in many cases. So yeah, I hope, I'm 95% sure that will happen, that in London now, KubeCon in a few weeks' time, Crossplane 2.0 will be presented to the public for the first time. So very, very exciting. What else? Oh, so many questions. This is unfair, because you post more questions when I'm alone than when Scott is helping me, putting a lot of pressure on me. Argo CD events should have a destination that could be Slack, as you can have a HTTP destination where you set up a webhook for Slack. Yeah, that's David. Oh, hey, David. Great guy. Clarifying one of the previous questions. So cool. What else? There are a few statements I'm going to skip. How do you handle the... Okay, here is another question. How do you handle deployment and release strategy for production and staging environments? I handle it in a worst possible way that terrifies many people, and that way is with YQ, right? I have production repo and I have staging repo, or I have two directories in the same repository, staging, production, and I have workflows like, somebody mentioned earlier Jenkins or GitHub Actions or whatever, right? And those workflows are building stuff and pushing stuff and running some tests and so on and so forth, right? At one moment in my workflow, I would clone staging environment, right? I would use YQ, literally YQ, the CLI, the silly CLI tool, to change the version in my manifest, and I would push it back to the repo. And from there on, Argo CD or Flux would do the work, right? I think that's the simplest possible way to do it. There are tools like Cargo that are much more elaborated than that. I haven't really started using them. I think I like the simplicity of doing it from inside workflows, simply because I still need to do workflows, right? I still need something to build and something to run tests and so on and so forth. And when I'm using them, I see no problem at one moment of that workflow or another modifying manifest and pushing it back to Git. So that's how I handle it with YQ, like Y, letter Y and Q. Okay, is monitoring inside DevOps scope if responsible, or is it is more SRE platform engineering scope? I don't think that there is a DevOps scope, right? I don't think that there should be DevOps engineers, right? I think that DevOps is an idea, just as Agile is an idea. And just as there are no Agile engineers, I don't think that there should be DevOps engineers. It's an idea, right? Now, I do believe that there are SREs, and I do think that there are platform engineers, right? And they do very different things. And monitoring can be inside, actually can be inside, it definitely inside of the scope of what SREs do, right? Because SREs are responsible for production, among other things. Platform engineering scope, no, right? The goal of platform engineers is not to monitor and observe production. It's quite the opposite. The goal of platform engineers is to enable everybody else to do the stuff that they need to do for their applications, including monitoring, right? So it could be the responsibility of platform engineering group, but then it would be not that much to watch and observe metrics and logs and traces in production, but rather to create mechanisms for others to do that, right? At least from my understanding of how those roles should be. Okay, regarding OTL, what do you think is better, the auto-instrumentation of manual? I cannot answer what is better because it depends what you want, right? Auto-instrumentation will, if auto-instrumentation gives you the level of granularity that you need, then definitely use auto-instrumentation, right? And what auto-instrumentation can and cannot do will also depend on the language, right? Compiled languages tend to be harder to auto-instrument than not compiled languages. Now, if you need more granular level than what those tools will give you, then you need to resort to manual, right? If you want to say, you know what, I want to instrument the beginning of this function and the middle of this function and the end of this function, right? Or I want to instrument this specific function, right? Or something like that. You will not get that without instrumentation. So use auto-instrumentation if it gives you everything you need, and then add manual instrumentation on top. You don't necessarily need to do one or the other. You can do both. Only auto or auto and manual for the parts that are missing. Okay, Miroslav, I was surprised that now Jenkins X uses Tekton for pipelines under the hood. And there's some interesting integration chat-ups. So because of this, I consider it just to avoid Tekton configuration. Okay, that's the part I'm not aware of. So I'm not following Jenkins. Basically, I stopped following Jenkins X since the day that all of us exited the project. So I honestly don't know what's happening behind the hood. I do know that Tekton was there before the exodus happened as well. But I don't know what's going on with it now, to be honest. What I would suggest, Miroslav, is see the activity, right? I do that for all the projects I'm interested in. See the activity, see how serious they are, how many people are contributing to it right now, right? If it's one person or occasionally, not counting bots, or maybe two, that might be a bad sign for a project of that size, right? Now, go and check it out. If there is a healthy community, then yeah, why not, right? Maybe it had great ideas. I would love for Jenkins X to get resurrected. That would be awesome. Okay, next one from Stephen Marshall. For a service mesh like Istio upgrade, do you think calling it from GitHub repo as a Helm release is good, or have your own Helm charts in a private release repo to be called from is a better approach of what you think. Depends, like everything else, depends on how much you want to invest. If you have the bandwidth, I think it's always better to keep third-party both charts but also images in your own registry, right? And then you have higher control. You can validate it, you can check it, you can sign it, and you can do all the good things that you normally do with your own stuff, right? So, and you can, that doesn't have to be that much work. You can just mirror third-party registry into your registry. So, now, calling it from a GitHub repo is always a better choice, just to be clear, right? That's GitOps, right? But, and another comment, again, I might have misunderstood, or have your own Helm charts in private repo, yes. So if you can, if it's not too much overhead, do it. Okay, David, it's a trick question. What do you think about the Yoke project? I haven't had time to go through it yet. What I do think is that projects like, I'm going to put in the same basket quite a few projects, right? Yoke, Crossplane, what else? Kubevela. There must be something else as well. Kratix, right? Are all projects that are going more or less in the same direction. And that direction is that we are creating our own APIs and then managing what is happening when somebody creates an instance of that API, a resource, inside of the cluster, right? So it's like, if I would compare all those with Helm, okay, so imagine that everything that you define as a template is actually a service in a cluster. And people are exposed only to values file, except that that values file has a schema and it is validated by the cluster and so on and so forth. So I'm in huge favor of all those projects, including Yoke. Now, I do think that if you do those things right, there are two components in those projects, right? There is the server-side component. Like in Crossplane, that would be all the resources that are composed. In case of Yoke, it would be similar thing, right? And same cron and so on and so forth. So basically, that's a part of how somebody, some ops person, platform engineer, whatever you want to define it, defines what happens when somebody creates an app, right? And a bunch of things happen. And there is the user interface or user-facing part, which is usually then becomes a simple YAML, right? Usually you create something like my database in my company, and then people have to deal only with 10 fields, not with 10,000 fields like RDS. Now, and those are two very separate things. For the user-facing part, that's simple YAML. I couldn't care less how you create it, right? If it's 10 lines, do it in YAML. You don't need Helm, you don't need Customize, you don't need anything. If it's 10 lines. Now, the server part can be hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands of lines, right? That can be huge, right? Everything that needs to happen. And when it's that big, that's my complaint now about cron, is YAML is not good enough, right? It looks good, but it's not. Sooner or later, you will need conditionals, you will need loops, you will need do this and that, right? And when you try to put those things into YAML, you always get something really horrible, right? And Yoke is good in that sense that it allows you to do more or less same things like other tools I mentioned, but with Go, right? If Go is your choice, Yoke is great. So I like the project. I haven't used it seriously yet, so I cannot say much more. Alexandra, do you know operator for MSSQL for Kubernetes? I don't. I haven't used MSSQL. Oh my, probably maybe 20 years. I don't even know what it is anymore. So unfortunately I don't. Right. Sorry for that. Josh, I just failed my CKA exam for the first time and hopefully only time I had to share. I'm sorry, it happens. You'll get it next time, I'm sure. It's I heard I haven't I haven't done it myself, but I heard that it's actually it's pretty hard. So I'm with you, man. Next time. Romans, 2 repos. One has CRDs, second has app. Okay. How to ensure we comply with CRD when we creating app specific resources? If we define the KCL schema and store it in a shared repo, how to use it in app repo? One has CRD, second has app. I'm still not sure, Roman. Can you ping me and we have a Hangouts chat and talk about? I feel silly that I still don't understand. Second has app. How to ensure we? So I'm going to interpret it myself, and you tell me how wrong I am. Right? You have a CRD, and that's defined somewhere, and that's normal. Like deployment, right? Deployment CRD. It's not CRD. It's baked into Kubernetes, but imagine it's CRD. It's defined somewhere else, right? How do you validate against it? You validate it by doing kube control dry run. Easiest way to validate, right? So you can do dry run. If you don't, I mean, it will fail when you apply it, right? And if you don't want to try to apply it and fail, then dry run should do it. Now, if the question is, hey, how do I convert that CRD into KCL schema? That's a different one, right? I fortunately always, most of the time, work with Crossplane when using KCL. So the schema is already baked into most of those. So I would need to Google. I don't know from the top of my head how to generate schema for KCL. But what I don't, and again, I'm not 100% sure. I would not use KCL for the app, just to be in the app repo, if that's where you're going, right? I think KCL is too complicated for, and too much learning curve for somebody to use it to replace 10 or 20 lines of YAML, right? So if that's where you're going, just don't. But ping me and we can have a chat, because I feel so embarrassed that I probably haven't understood it the second time. Okay. Oh, so many questions. This is so awesome, guys and girls. Not sure if it's a basic question, but I like to hear your thoughts on Hotel's distributed tracing capability compared to something like Pedantic log file and Datadog. I haven't used Pedantic log file, so I cannot compare it. What I do know is that tracing is a standard in OTL and Hotel, and everybody that matters in the observability area is involved with it some way or another, including Datadog. And if there is something missing, they're free to add it to the spec, right? But I cannot say much more, mostly because I don't know what Pedantic log file is. Sorry for that. More. Everything is Coolio. Do you know of a good open source APM solution and exception monitoring? I don't, unfortunately. I don't use APMs much myself. I tend to be limited to like pure metrics, traces, logs. I'm not even sure these days what APM solution is, to be honest. So not a good one to answer that one. From Easy Peasy, we use Alloy. Auto config for tracing metrics and logs. Use the Prometheus and Loki component configuration in Alloy. Yeah, sounds great. Miroslav, just curious, could you share your concerns about Kubernetes on top of bare metal and Proxmox provisioning managing by Rancher? I haven't been using Rancher for a long time, and to make it even worse, and the reason why I cannot really answer that question, I don't use bare metal myself, right? I'm cloud spoiled, right? 99% of what they do is in cloud, most of the time hyperscalers. I use many of them. So if you ask me, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, UpCloud, Civo, all those, yes, but I'm not using bare metal, so cannot really churn in on that one, right? That's why I was tiptoeing around that question earlier and answering it very poorly. Easy peasy, prompt tail is marked as feature complete. Great. What else? How to patch KDE2. I don't know what KDE2 is. Sorry. There are things I don't know. Sorry for that. Bazookas. Use Grafana alloy is much better and support total as well. There we go. That's one of the answers to one of the previous questions. Most Google, what's your take on auto instrumentation? Manual of auto instrumentation. I think I already answered that one. This feels like a duplicate. What else? Stephen, Marshall. I meant when we explore a lot of new Gen AI tools, we give it to the scientists to explore like the most no-code, low-code for dev rag, apps hosting on EKS infras and Helm charts, for example, secure. So, you know, if it's running in Kubernetes, then it's equally secure or insecure as anything else you're running in Kubernetes, right? So what confuses me a lot with that question is I'm not sure that I follow what would be specific to AI, right? If the question is in general, hey, how to make things secure in Kubernetes, like EKS that you mentioned there. Oh, there's a lot, right? Kind of like use slim images. I think that we actually spoke about it for a while in the last week's session with Scott, right? Deny access direct to the cluster. Make sure that you're prevented from DDoS attacks and so on and so forth, right? There's a lot in security, a lot. But the part I'm failing is that I'm not sure that there is any difference between, hey, make AI secure as anything else secure in Kubernetes clusters. Probably misunderstood again. Everything is cool here. I tried to deploy the Loki myself and found it very difficult to do. I'm a noob, and do you have a similar experience? No, I never had problem with Loki, to be honest. I had problems with... I'm not sure whether Loki has an operator as well. I had problems with Prometheus operator because I think it's horrible. But Loki itself or anything else from that stack, Grafana stack, let's call it, including Prometheus, no, not really. I mean, I just run it as a Helm chart and never had any issue. Now, I don't know whether you're facing something specific, but or maybe I was lucky. Who knows? Okay, Bewater. Hi, I have a question. I'm using Crossplane to create AIM roles and policies for SA. InfoSec is worried about potential security issue this can lead. Crossplane get compromised and create a role admin. Yeah, I mean, if you give Crossplane permissions to be able to create a role admin, then theoretically it can create a role admin, right? Now, depends whether you want Crossplane never to create role admin or not to create it in certain conditions. If it's never to create, just permissions you give to Crossplane shouldn't have the part that allows it to create admin role or anything else, right? To create, right? Now, on top of that, you might, and this depends on the scale you're running, right? If you're bigger scale, normally companies or teams using Crossplane would separate it into different control planes or different clusters, right? But that might not be feasible if you're smaller. But also, one thing to note is that you need to see Crossplane in a very different light than, let's say, Terraform. And I'm using Terraform as an example here, not trying to trash it, right? Because when you run Terraform, let's say on my laptop, the permissions that I have are the same permissions that Terraform will have to do something, right? So in order for Terraform to have elevated permissions needed to do something, I need to have elevated permissions to do something. Crossplane, and this is not always the case in Terraform because you can run it inside of a server and then the story would be different, but most people use it from laptops. Now, Crossplane is running in a cluster. And there is a difference between permissions that Crossplane has to do something, and then on the other hand, permissions that you have to operate that Kubernetes cluster where Crossplane is running. Because I can say, hey, Crossplane, I'm going to give you permissions to manage X, whatever X is. But Joe, I'm not going to give you permission to create the managed resource or the composition or what's or not that will actually, through Crossplane, be able to do that. So we are talking about two sets of permissions, like what Crossplane can do, which is running in a cluster, and what you can do accessing that cluster and instructing Crossplane to do something. And then we are really talking about the second group of permissions would be airbag in Kubernetes itself, and hopefully you're using some kind of policies like hydrator, right? Which can further define what you can and cannot do. So think of permissions much more from the perspective of which types of Kubernetes resources you can create. Can you create EC2 instance or no, right? Kubernetes resource, not the EC2 over there. But if you can create EC2, then Crossplane will create it for you. If you cannot, it will not, right? So limit which types of resources one can access and manipulate and what they can do within that cluster. And that would be the same answer no matter whether you use Crossplane or use, let's say, cluster API that we mentioned earlier. Okay, have you used Kubernetes K3s or Lightstream? I used K3s before, and I use them mostly for local stuff on my laptop. For a while now, I'm mostly, I was switching between one or the other. For a while now, my favorite was Rancher Desktop, which I believe at that time and probably still uses K3s. And am I mixing K3s now with something else? K3s. I just want to make sure that I'm not mixing it. Yeah, exactly. But I never used it for edge devices and things like that. I'm not really in that space that much. So, and Lightstream, never. Sorry, never used it. Mask Hugo says, yes, Loki is difficult at the beginning, but when you get used to it, it will be part of your day. Yeah. If you need more flexible settings to work in Kubernetes, especially more frequent cron job launches, are there any custom controllers for this? Yes, there is. Let me see or remember or what was the name? That's the one I have. What is the name? Quadrant or coordinator? I'm always mixing those two. Let me see. No, not quadrant, coordinator. Coordinator might be something. No, not even coordinator. What's the name? I forgot. My brain stopped. I'm sorry for that. It was announced in Salt Lake City as one of the keynotes, and I cannot remember it now. I used it and I cannot remember. So there is better if you want to run it at scale, and I cannot remember the name. What I do know is that folks working on the Large Hadron Collider actually came up with it, and it looks really, really awesome. But it's really for huge scales. It's huge scale, if that's what you're looking for. Okay, Mask Hugo, you don't need custom controllers to run cron job on Kubernetes is supported out of the box. Yes, but also depends what you want to do with the cron job, right? If you want to distribute it, especially for AI, ML, and all that stuff, then cron job in Kubernetes will not really cut it, to be honest. Steel Whale. When do you create a semver tag for your Docker image? Do you semver tag even if your image has not been validated in a testing environment? Yes. I semver every single release. Now, what I often do is that no matter whether it's validated or no, but what I would always usually do is add some suffix, like, testing, beta, alpha, whatever, right? And then I would have the same semver with different suffixes until it becomes the semver, the one that I'm going to release, which is without suffix, right? So let's say that I have a release 1.2.3, and then it might start like 1.2.3, I don't know, alpha, beta, testing, whatever you want, dash something else until it becomes the final release. And that's all in a case, but actually continuity matters, right? In some cases, I expect that after 1.2.3 comes 1.2.4, right? When there is no such expectation, then I wouldn't even bother with those suffixes. Kind of, I have 1.2.4 and 5 and 6 and 7, and they were never released, and cool, right? So it depends on how much it matters, continuity or no. If it does matter, just add some suffix to the somewhere, right? And then you know really what are you working towards for, and so on and so forth. And by the way, you don't have to always build a new image. You just tag it multiple times. I'm sorry, folks. I just realized that we are already over the time. It's already 6 minutes past the top of the hour. And there are so many questions. Thank you all. This was amazing. Thank you all so much for all those questions. I hope that I helped at least a bit. Next week, we will have a guest. And the week after next, Scott is back. And we'll do our best to continue this every week. We might have a break during KubeCon. We'll see. Maybe we do it, I don't know, write in a comment whether that would be interesting. Maybe we'll do it live from KubeCon. Who knows? We'll see. Thank you so much. Hope this was somehow helpful. See you next week. Cheers.